Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is your entrepreneurship teacher, Professor Henry Buis of Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. Today I want to talk about circumcision. You can see I've displayed the tools of circumcision, the modern clinical tools, surgery, and the traditional tools in the Luya land, Bukusu, for example. These are tools of circumcision. Now, circumcision is a ritual. And a ritual is part of culture. What's culture? Is the total sum of the elements that we see here. The tools, the medical cure, the language, the working schedules, the clothing, the jokes, the housing, the food, name them. So, culture is a way of living. This is a way of living of a people. And the rituals are elements of that way of living. You can see rituals are just part of the many elements of culture. So we cannot call a ritual like circumcision a culture, but we can call it part element of a culture. Now, circumcision is done globally. The prevalence of circumcision in North America, in Africa, in Australia, Europe. But you see the blue ones, either culture of circumcision, the element of circumcision is low or absent. Now, circumcision is said to be far older than recorded history. It is far older than the biblical account of Genesis, that book of the beginnings. It is said to have originated in ancient Egypt long before Jesus Christ. 2300 BC, 5th century BC, and so on and so forth, originating from the land of the pyramids. So it is said. Now, the form in which it takes and the age at which it's practiced varies. In Judaism, it is on the 8th day of birth, and that this is as part of, we are told, the covenant of God. You can see very young child in this picture being circumcised. So it may not be a rite of passage. This is a young child. In Islam, circumcision is also known as tahara, meaning purification. So in Islam, the main reason is cleanliness, the ritual. So the rituals for circumcision vary. Cleanliness, covenant of God, rite of passage, and so on and so forth. In Africa, it is done in North Africa. You can see a young child being in Tunisia, being circumcised. In Benin, West Africa, you can see a very mature boy sitting down being circumcised. In South Africa, the circumcision. In East Africa, Kenya, the Tiriki, that is their ceremony. Uganda, the Wakishu, that's the ceremony. So we can say in most Africa, circumcision is done for religious and cultural or traditional reasons, including the rite of passage to adulthood. Now, I want us to watch this clip. Time was August 2022. Event, Bukusu Cultural Circumcision. Watch it carefully. Notice a senior lady citizen, or a senior citizen lady, sees cruelty in circumcision, the practice of circumcision. And I want you also to note that the people performing the culture, and I've quoted the word culture because circumcision, as I said, is an element of culture. It cannot be culture itself. Notice that the people performing the ritual, traditional practice, are themselves not traditionally dressed. The attire is modern. Behind it, you will see that the housing also, you remember the wheel of culture, the elements of culture started with housing. The housing is also not necessarily traditional. So a traditional practice being performed in a modern environment. Look at that slap. Damaging slap. The lady citizen is not amused. He says we must change. That's it. It's a quarrel. Even the old themselves, like the lady, is saying, no, we have outgrown this. Now, Buku circumcision. 18th century, it is said, is when Bukusu started circumcising. But Bukusu existed even in the 1st century. Mango Malule kills a terra python, Yabebe. Then he is gifted as a boy girl for a wife. The girl refuses intercourse with an uncircumcised man, and therefore Mango is forced to be circumcised by an Olukayet. That means as a boy name. And he was circumcised sitting on a 3-legged stool. Yes, this is an illustration of Mango killing this terrible serpent, terrible Yabebe, python, and therefore being gifted the woman who insists that she was circumcised. And this circumcision age set, timetable, is indicative that actual circumcision started in the 19th century, maybe even 18th century. It did not start from the beginning, circumcision as we see it today. Therefore, the naming also tells us approximately the time this ritual started. Yes. First lessons, what we learned. 3. Bukusu adopted circumcision from Saboit, the Kalenjin. Mango circumcision was not necessarily a rite of passage. He was already an old man. Mango sat down to be circumcised. He did not stand up. So some differences, some modifications, some modernization has gone on, some changes. However, the presence of circumcision in the other Luya tribes indicates an earlier adoption before the Mango era. That the Bukusu came from Egypt may mean they, like Egyptians, were also circumcising, but maybe in a different format. Not much of that is known. So we could say circumcision itself among the Bukusu must have changed before it reaches the Mango style, the Mango format. Yes, we Bukusus and the Bandus migrated from Egypt down from the first AD, the 0 AD, the 1st century, down to where we are. All these arrows indicate the movement of the Bantu originating from Egypt. Of course, there are some versions of originating West Africa, but there it is. Circumcision, as we know it, starts only when the Bukusu reach Kenya. Now, I met Ambassador Masafu of the DRC, George Masafu, the doctor. He says, circumcision is no longer a cultural practice, but a medical need for all males, especially the lessons we learned from HIV, that a circumcised male has a 60% protection from being infected by HIV over the uncircumcised counterpart. So, Dr. Masafu says, circumcision is a medical need and not a cultural imperative. His words are supported by these clips.
Male circumcision is the oldest and most common surgical procedure. With 30% of men globally and 67% of men in sub-Saharan Africa circumcised, social and cultural factors are the main determinants of acceptability. Until now, the implications of the simple procedure have reflected record impact on health status of populations. Over 66% of campaigns that have been directed to Kenya, specifically Nyanza province, have been met through sustained government leadership, financial and technical support of the international donor community, and a partnership strategy that has engaged a broad array of stakeholders. Nyanza continues to record increased uptake of voluntary medical male circumcision.
I introduce all the services we have in a facility. Like when we are working here, we are not working as Nyanza Reproductive Health Society, but we work as a department in the ministry.
For identified participants, they go through aggressive sensitization.
The first thing we do is to welcome the patient into the theater. We will sit down. We will take his blood pressure. We'll take his pulse rate. We'll take his temperature.
Increased uptake of medical male circumcision among the adult population in Nyanza has led to the adoption of behavior change practices that have reflected in form of reduced infection, in addition to reduced chances of acquiring the human papillomavirus that could lead to penile cancer.
It has a number of advantages, apart from reducing chances of one acquiring HIV infection by 60%. Male circumcision reduces chances of an individual acquiring or developing penile cancer.
Yes, you are hearing from the Luo community of Kenya. The Luo community, they don't have circumcision as an element of their culture. But noticing and believing and recognizing that circumcision is a health, has health aspects, has health benefits, the Luo have started circumcising, meaning really we can circumcise particularly or for purposes of health and hygiene. Let's go to South Africa.
First of all, let's talk about the campaign that you launched today. What's it all about?
The MMC, or Medical Male Circumcision Campaign, is a campaign which we have actually launched in 2010. Today I was just launching it for the higher education sector. It has been proven by science that medical male circumcision has got the capacity to reduce the incidences or prevalence of HIV and AIDS by between 50 and 60%. So it's an advice that all males need to be circumcised.
Questions being asked, how can we reconcile modern medical procedures with cultural practices like male circumcision? More and more young men dying in botched procedures, and some are even mutilated. We understand at the moment 23 young men have died in Mpumalanga initiation schools. I need to note, it is not just one school, it is around the province. A huge pleasure to welcome back to the show Dr. Nfotleng Mabena, who works for the Center of HIV and AIDS Prevention, and male circumcision is one of her specialities. Doctor, good morning to you. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. How, in this day and age, regardless of culture, are we seeing 23 young men dying?
Gareth, I think I need to state at this point that I speak as a medical professional, as a healthcare provider. What we do circumcisions based on the health benefits that exist.
Yes, as you can see, Dr. Masafi is not the only one advocating for modernization of, circumcision. Indeed, today, male circumcision is widespread and mainly for health and hygiene purposes. You can see young ones in North Africa campaign to modernize circumcision. Surgeons, indeed, even women circumcise. Culturally, a woman would never circumcise a man, particularly in Luya land, in Bukusu. You can see these are all modern, and we have people voluntarily lining up to go for circumcision. And these are unconfirmed statistics in Bungoma and among the Bukusu, that 2,000, about 1,000 numbers were circumcised, and 70% were traditional method of circumcision, and only 30% clinical method. 2010, numbers were difficult to come by, but the oral talk was about 50 estimation, 50-50. Clinical method increased to 50, traditional reduced to 50. In 2010, again, numbers are not easy to come by, but it is thought that clinical method increased to 70 as traditional method dropped to 30. Extrapolating this to 2030, we could easily see that 90% clinical method and 10% traditional method. So this is a positive indication, and we need to support such. And again, Ambassador Masafu advocates for a cultural re-engineering by medics to promote the essence of circumcision, to prevent and protect males from sexually transmitted diseases like HIV, and discard the vices associated with the traditional circumcision ceremonies. He stresses, we must positively transform our culture. Dr. Masafu is not saying that we disregard our culture. We say positively transform it. Meaning, aspects like these hard slaps need not be. Those hard slaps can even be damaging depending on how, on who they are done. And that this is the aspect that might lead to the unwelcome practice as it is now. Let us construct an economic model, a functional model out of these elements of culture. There it is. C is a function of ETL, etc., etc. We are saying culture is a function of the environment, the technology, the interaction, etc., etc. So culture is not static. We don't just passively consume it. We create it. So we also have the power to change it. And the question becomes, how many of these elements have changed in Boku's culture? The medical cure, the working schedules, the manners, the food, the housing. Look around yourself. Have we changed any of these? So could we also change the rituals for the better? Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please, to support us bring you more, like it, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to leave a comment. Thank you so much. Have a cultural day, won't you?